This is Bloomberg Law with June Grasso from Bloomberg Radio.
I'm extremely proud of my son, Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know. And I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
President Joe Biden said it over and over again. He would not pardon his son Hunter for felony gun and tax convictions. And White House Press Secretary Kareem Jean-Pierre confirmed it over and over again.
From a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Well,
I just said no. I just answered. Go ahead.
Why doesn't President Biden just pardon him?
President, I've been very clear. The president's not going to pardon his son.
And one more.
It's still a no. It's still a no.
It will always be a no.
It's still a no. It will be a no. It is a no. And I don't have anything else to add. Will he pardon his son? No. The president, I can speak for the president, and he said he would not pardon his son. And I'm just going to leave it there.
But then on Sunday, Biden did a 180 and gave his son Hunter a sweeping, unconditional pardon, not just for the gun and tax convictions, but also for any federal crime he may have committed in the past decade. A jury in Delaware convicted Hunter Biden of 3 felonies in June for purchasing a gun in 2018 when he lied on a federal form by claiming he was not illegally using or addicted to drugs. He'd been set to stand trial in September in a California case accusing him of failing to pay at least $1.4 million in taxes, but he agreed to plead guilty to misdemeanor and felony charges before trial. He was supposed to be sentenced this month in the 2 federal cases, until his father pardoned him. President Biden justified his breaking his pledge by saying that raw politics infected the process and led to a miscarriage of justice. Joining me is constitutional law scholar Philip Bobbitt, a professor at Columbia Law School. This pardon not only covers the felony tax and gun charges, it also protects Hunter Biden from ever facing federal charges over any crimes he could possibly have committed over the past decade. How broad is that?
That's quite broad. The only precedent that comes to mind is the Ford pardon of President Nixon. That is quite as all-encompassing as that. That's unusually broad.
Obviously, this decade-long timeline was not randomly chosen. It covers Hunter Biden's entire tenure on the board of Burisma and his other questionable overseas business ventures. So it seems designed to stop any future prosecutions of Hunter Biden for his overseas dealings.
That makes sense. My take on this is that it's really a kind of a spiraling down of our constitutional culture. And that the reason why it's so broad is because the president fears a series of improper prosecutions by the new administration.
Explain what you mean by spiraling down.
Well, I'm sure the president was advised that the way to do this, I'm a father of a son. Believe me, I deeply empathize with the president's predicament. But I imagine he was advised that the way to do that was to wait until the sentencing dates. I think the gun charges are December the 12th in Delaware. The tax charges are December the 16th in California, still well within his presidency. And depending on how severe the sentences were, they might well have been probationary or suspended or mild sentences. But depending on what they were like, the president could then commute them to a greater or lesser degree. That's still problematic in many respects, and I understand people who would have that reaction. But it's not as dramatic or as troubling as the blanket pardon that you described. And since I'm sure the president got excellent legal advice on this, why did he do this? And I think the only thing that can account for it is his anxiety that the new administration is going to go after his family, as they said many times in the campaign they would. I say it's spiraling down because it's sort of, Senator Moynihan once said, defining deviancy down. It is deviant for the president to try to use law enforcement and the federal law enforcement agencies to go after his predecessors. I can't think of any precedent until Trump. And an interesting exchange occurred in Trump versus United States, the presidential immunity case, when Justice Alito said that they wanted to give presumptive immunity because he was concerned about a future president persecuting, not just prosecuting, one of his predecessors. And the press automatically assumed this was something in favor of Trump. I didn't hear it that way at all. It sounded to me as though the justice was talking about Trump being elected and turning on Biden and his family. And I don't think that was really an unrealistic concern. And so one spiral of unprecedented action begets another in defense, and it just circles downward.
So President Biden said things like, no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than he was singled out only because he's my son, and that's wrong. But that doesn't answer for the broadness of the pardon.
Well, I think that's right, but I think that the broadness of the pardon is about future prosecutions. And I think it's because the president is extremely concerned about all the threats that President Trump has made against Hunter Biden and against the Biden family. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think that's paranoid.
Even some Democrats are criticizing the Hunter Biden pardon. Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado said the president put personal interest ahead of duty and that this decision further erodes Americans' faith that the justice system is fair and equal for all. Colorado Governor Jared Polis said it was a bad precedent that could be abused by later presidents and will sadly tarnish Biden's reputation.
I'm afraid that that's correct, and that's why I say it's a spiraling down. It makes the office of the presidency and the constitutional restraints in the presidency degraded. But it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It hasn't come out of nowhere. This isn't a president singling out his son and giving him a blanket pardon because he thinks that the poor boy is going to be prosecuted and persecuted the rest of his life. I think it is in direct response to the multiple threats made by President Trump about using the law enforcement agencies of the federal government to go after the Biden family. And I think that one wrong begets another.
I mean, there's the precedent of Richard Nixon. Do you think this is a precedent that will lead other presidents to give blanket pardons?
Could very well. A lot of the pardons in the last couple of years, last few years, have been troubling. Sometimes it looked as though pardons were being dangled before witnesses, keep them from giving testimony. I believe Michael Cohen testified to that effect. So pardons have come under some negative scrutiny lately anyway. And sure, once it's on the books, it sits there like a gun on a dinner table waiting to be used.
Only 2 other presidents have pardoned family members. President Bill Clinton pardoned his brother Roger, who had pleaded guilty to selling cocaine to an undercover police officer and spent a year in prison. And President Trump pardoned his son-in-law, Jared Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, who had pleaded guilty to 18 counts of falsifying tax returns, retaliating against a witness, and making false statements about campaign contributions to the Federal Election Commission. And over the weekend, Trump announced plans to nominate Charles Kushner to be the U.S. envoy to France. I'm wondering if there are so few of these pardons of family members because presidents are hesitant to do that or because family members just don't get into trouble like this.
The culture may be changing, but I think the families of politicians, at least in my lifetime, my experience, are really coached quite rigorously. Don't do this, don't do that. Don't take that job. It'll look as though you're being favored. Don't write that article. It'll look as though you're my mouthpiece. The families are quite aware of the negative publicity their children can give them, and they are very strict with them. Now, of course, there are outliers, and there are kids that get out of control. But I think generally, at least in the era when I was growing up, the families were very, very circumspect.
The pardon power, would you say it's the one unchecked power the president has?
Sort of. It's not a power that is reviewable by the courts. and it's not a power that can be modified by the Congress. However, it's not entirely unchecked. For example, if you were to take a bribe, or if you were to solicit a bribe, do this for me and I will pardon you, is soliciting a bribe. I think that you could still be prosecuted. The pardon might stand, although that's not entirely certain. But I think the pardon probably would stand, but the underlying crime would still be prosecuted. That's because there's a difference between granting a pardon and taking a bribe.
It seems like Biden, in his explanation for the pardon, is sort of adopting the Trump view of the justice system being unfair and targeting his son unfairly.
Maybe. I'm not sure I agree with you, or perhaps I would put it a little more finely grained way. I thought that Trump's view was the justice system was systematically unfair towards a whole class of people, MAGA, zealot, J6 rioters, that Trump supporters generally, or Donald Trump in particular, and that was to silence them politically. I think what the President Biden was saying was that Hunter Biden would never have been prosecuted at all for these pretty minor offenses, and certainly gun offenses, pretty absurd, had he not been the president's son. And that's not just because, or even mainly because, the Justice Department is out to get the Biden family. It's because the children of prominent people, of celebrities, of people in high office, are often held to a higher standard.
What a lot of people also seem to be taking issue with is that Biden said again and again, even after Trump's reelection, that he wasn't going to pardon his son. So why do a 180 and do it?
Well, that's what we're given free will for. We're allowed to change our minds. I think it was a mistake, but I think it was an understandable mistake, not an irrational mistake in light of the threats made against the Biden family by Donald Trump and his team. And I think that perhaps the president thought his vice president would win the election, so he wouldn't have to worry about those threats. Or perhaps he thought that once Trump won the election, Trump would moderate his vitriol and his threats. But I can see how at some point you say, wait a minute, he's been elected, he's going to follow through with these threats. That's a world I didn't really anticipate, and I'm going to have to react to it.
Have presidents used the pardon power more in recent years than presidents in the past did?
Yes and no. It's been used more frequently for individual pardons. But after the Whiskey Rebellion and George Washington's presidency, after the Civil War, even after the movement of war protesters in the Vietnam era to Canada, presidents would pardon a whole class of people. So the numbers were greater, but the incidents were fewer, if you see what I mean. And I think that if you go back to the Federalist Papers and to the history of the drafting of the Constitution, this idea of ameliorating deep social cleavages was one of, not the only, but was one of the most important purposes behind the pardon power, to try to give amnesties, to take groups that had been alienated and admittedly committed crimes against the state and somehow reconcile them back to the society.
A group of Democratic lawmakers has called on President Biden to use the pardon power in his remaining time to correct injustices and to pardon, for example, all the people who are on federal death row, knowing that Donald Trump, in his first term, restarted federal executions, which had been dormant. Do you think that's a good idea, more in line with what the pardon power is about?
I don't think that's inconsistent with the pardon power. I think that obviously it's important, and it's important morally and politically, but you're talking about a very small number of people. Most people on death row are in state prisons. Do
you see an area where he might issue pardons to sort of make a mark before he leaves?
No, I'd say he's done that.
I don't think anyone can dispute that. Thanks so much for being on the show. That's Professor Philip Bobbitt of Columbia Law School. Turning now to legal news in the music industry.
Incarnated, I was stargazing. Life goes on, I need her, my babies. Woke up looking for the broccoli. High key, keep a horn on me. That could my seat. IP ownership, the blueprint is by me.
That's hip hop superstar Kendrick Lamar's wildly popular "Not Like Us." Lamar's track disses another hip-hop superstar, Drake.
Say, Drake, I hear you like I'm young. You better not ever go to cell block 1.
But Drake has taken their bitter feud to a new level by filing 2 legal actions against Universal Music, the parent company of the labels for both artists. Joining me is entertainment attorney Ron Bienstock of Scarinci Hollenbeck. Ron, these aren't lawsuits yet. Tell us about the first filed in New York, which is a civil RICO pre-action suit.
Yeah, so we've got actually parallel pre-complaint filings known as petitions, one in New York, one in Texas. The pre-complaint, if you will, in New York is based upon the relationship between Universal and Spotify. Spotify that's the number one streaming service in the world. And those who don't know who Universal is, they are one of the 3 major giant music business powerhouses, both with records, publishing interests, and have both artists, Kendrick Lamar and Drake, through 2 different divisions assigned to Universal Music Group, which makes it even more confusing. But the petitions are looking for depositions and information to establish a full complaint cause of action against these defendants for, in New York specifically, payola, which is a 1934 law. I once said payola to some people under 30. They thought I was making that word up. Payola is the illegal payment to a radio station, or it could be any other, now in the digital age, another platform, to play a specific artist or specific piece of music. So in New York, it involves Spotify. In Texas, it involves iHeartRadio. There's some fascinating facts about this New York petition. I think most people need to know that Universal Music owns 3.27% of Spotify. That would have been something we wouldn't have seen in the past, but the majors all have an interest now in Spotify, and that Spotify pays annually in terms of streaming and other download income, but mostly streaming income, over $2.5 billion to your music. So this is a huge relationship. When you switch to the Texas action, that really involves iHeartRadio, the number one radio station in the country. And there's been, as the complaint, it should say pre-complaint says, a symbiotic relationship between UMusic and iHeartRadio. UMusic controls a vast number of hits over the last decade. And so if you want to have access to those hits, you're going to be close to the company that supplies that content to you.
So break it down for us. What does the first petition in New York claim?
So the first petition in New York says effectively, hey, you favored Kendrick Lamar in this now sort of infamous rap beef, as we would call this, relatively new phenomena, if you will, not this East Coast, West Coast thing, but this very specific rapper versus rapper beef, which are both on the same label. They say you favored, the New York petition says you favored Kendrick Lamar. You boosted his song versus mine in this dispute we were having, this musical dispute we were having. And you favored him on it, and you paid someone in terms of Spotify to stream more of it, and you took advantage of what you could take advantage of to give this artist favor over me.
So what's the point of a pre-action suit? What are they looking for?
They're looking for discovery. They're saying, we think, it's kind of like saying information and belief. We're saying, hey, we think, we've got some proof, but we don't have the exact verbiage we need. We need some facts. So to prove our facts so we can go and file a formal complaint with a litany of issues here, we want to have pre-complaint discovery, kind of like an expedited discovery, both in New York involving Spotify and UMusic, and then in Texas, we want a very similar theory where we're saying there was payola committed again with the iHeartRadio station, the national chain station. We want to have expedited discovery so we can go find out the facts. We want to talk to people from UMusic. We want to talk to people from iHeartRadio to get the facts so we can have a more formal complaint filed.
So just focusing on New York for a moment, do you think that they'll be able to get that?
It's a tough hurdle to get over here, saying we don't have enough, but we want you as the court system to provide us the right to go and do this. I don't know if they've established enough initially with this pre-complaint petition. It'll be really up to the court to allow some limited scope of discovery. Maybe they'll do that. I don't think this is going to be some wide open fields, get to talk to anyone you want. I think they're going to be very narrow to grasp some of those facts to see if they can get to the complaint stage. Remember, we're in state court, we're not in federal court. So a lot of the dismissal issues and the standards for dismissal are slightly different in New York and in Texas.
Now, is the Texas action about defamation?
It's a combination. It is, again, a payola claim saying you favored Kendrick Lamar versus me, Drake. You favored this artist, and you took advantage of your relationship and the power you wield as a powerhouse major record company and content owner. And you took advantage of that, and you preferred getting this guy boosted versus me, and you did it through iHeartRadio. Then there's this defamatory language, which kind of runs through both of the petitions, but more specifically in Texas, says you knew what he was saying could be false or was false, and you allowed him to put that into lyrics. This all took place this year, and you allowed him to put this into lyrics, and you let that into the marketplace. There's a side moment that I haven't seen anybody discuss here, and I wanted to bring this one issue up. I don't have Kendrick Lamar's recording agreement because that's going to be confidential. But generally with record labels, the artist has a warranty and representation that they won't defame, that they won't infringe on someone else's copyright and things of this nature. And if they do, they will have to indemnify the record company. Now, I haven't seen anybody bring this up yet because maybe we just don't know, and this is purely speculative, because Drake has not sued Kendrick Lamar personally in either of these pre-complaint petitions. But if he's looking to get some fiscal comeuppance, this may be the way, because if Kendrick Lamar is accused of defamatory lyrics, then he may have to defend by indemnifying your music against any of these future lawsuits.
Why is he not suing or bringing these petitions against Kendrick Lamar?
Question of the day. Is it because, we're going to speculate, well, it's defamatory. So we're saying, hey, you claim these things are defamatory, but truth is the absolute defense. So if Kendrick Lamar has proof or knows these things to be true and can show that, that's not going to carry the day. That's not a good idea for Drake. So I think that there's a lot of personal issues going back and forth, but they're in the guise of a business petition lawsuit where we are looking to make ourselves get even with somebody in a clear battle of entertainment, stalwart kingpins, if you will, where one did not get the success the other did. Perhaps there was this, you played unfair as you music. The winner here is Universal Music, unless they, of course, are going to eventually have to, pay out, and if there's a decision against them. But they win both ways. You know what's going to happen. All of these songs are going to get boosted by these lawsuits. People go right back and start listening again. And there's all kinds of other issues that took place. Drake sold a portion of his catalog this year. There was a $150 million buyout by Kilometer, which is Kilometre, I think is the French-Canadian way you describe it, in October. All of this is taking place now. And there's also this prior lawsuit of copyright infringement involving Drake and the producer Chris Brown. So Drake has some real experience here in the courtroom in this last year. Lots of filings, lots of accusations, a lot of things going on. It's a lot to keep track of.
Okay, just on the face of it, you accuse someone of being a certifiable pedophile. That seems defamatory to me.
And that's the interesting point, because if you look at the lyrics, he doesn't say, Drake, you are. He says, things about someone else. So that's defamatory in an inference. But I think people know who he's inferring. So I think you draw the straight line to the potential plaintiff by saying, well, everybody knows that's me. Everybody knows you're talking about me. But he does not say him by name. He does not say Drake by name.
I've been talking to entertainment lawyer Ron Bienstock of Scarinci Hollenbeck. There's been some speculation that Drake is using this to get information from Universal to somehow get out of his deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems one of the most likely outcomes of this. We all know getting out of record deals. Now, I'm not privy to know the structure of his agreement. People have called it a license deal in the press. That's a different relationship. That means he owns his masters and he's licensed them to them. But if you have a long-term license deal and you want to pull back the ownership of those masters that you're releasing, this could be one way of doing that. Clearly, he doesn't want to do business with these people anymore. And I would say most likely Universal Music doesn't want to do business with him. So maybe that is the outcome. Releases where he gets the return or reversion of all of his masters. That could be part of the game here. I don't want to use the word game because it's serious civil litigation, but that could be part of what he's looking for.
A lot of artists are problematic. Do you think that Universal really doesn't want to deal with Drake anymore, considering his success?
It's a great question. Why would you give into this and drop it? But no judge is going to keep two people together who don't get along anymore. Eventually, there's going to be a decision about the ownership of these masters and the reversion. I think that's not in these two suits, but we know that's coming. So if you're not getting along with and if they're just the distributor and promo arm, and you don't feel they're doing the job, yeah, you want out. Does that mean he'll get all of the masters back? We don't know. Does that mean he'll get prior masters up until this day or the day of the decision, stay with Universal for a period of time? That'll remain to be seen. But it could be that this is the methodology for Drake to get himself out of his deal with Universal.
I have to say, this is very confusing. So tell me what I missed.
There is so much stuff going on because you've got two petitions with one of the same defendant and then two different defendants in a pre-complaint action to get more information about all these different people so they can then go further in a lawsuit claiming that all of these things have taken place. And they revolve around really serious issues in civil RICO. Payola is not just civil, but it's also a crime. Drake has brought up in the complaint in New York that, a long time ago, I think 2006 is a long time ago, that you settled over a payola complaint and you paid out. That doesn't mean it took place now, but welcome to the modern digital age involving payola and bots and other terminology we didn't talk about with CDs and vinyl. It's a different world. And this is the 2024 version of what the 1934 payola was, when record companies in the 30s and 40s put a $100 bill inside the jacket of a vinyl album cover and gave it to someone at a radio station and wink, wink, nod, nod, please play this. This is your new favorite song. Now it's all done digitally, and now we have all AI, and we have algorithmic ways of doing this, and someone's going to have to prove that.
Also, if there was, the use of bots and things, and Drake also probably benefited from that at some point, right?
Yeah, he did. He just didn't benefit from it the way he felt he should have. I think he felt, and I'm reading these complaints, he's suggesting that it was unfairly weighted against him, that Kendrick Lamar and the numbers on that Kendrick Lamar track, a particular one track, is like 1 billion streams. That's, Taylor Swift territory. Kendrick Lamar and Drake are two of the biggest names in their specific genre in the world. These are pop icons now. And this is real money in the music business. We're talking about substantial income, substantial accusations that could affect other artists and how they're dealt with. If it's true that they are committing payola and they're doing it through the digital versions of the $100 bill in the record sleeve, maybe people will be less successful in the future. Maybe we won't have the same numbers. I think right now we're in such a world of speculation because of the two filings, and we have no rejoinders from people yet. We don't know where we're going on these. We don't know if the courts are going to allow these petitions to ripen into full complaints and allow this discovery. But if they do, it's going to be very interesting. Hip-hop rap is pop. It really is. I mean, we're talking about, some of the most popular artists in the world. And it's not a narrow focus. It's across every demographic. So all these demographics listen to this material. And Kendrick Lamar, I mean, he's been awarded all kinds of laudatory awards for his poetry, lyrics. So people take both these people very seriously. And as pop spokespersons, they've decided to focus on each other and are talking about each other. And in doing that, one party is saying, that record company, hey, you guys are favoring that guy over me. No fairsies.
I like that, no fairsies. That really sums up the whole thing. Thanks so much, Ron. That's entertainment attorney Ron Bienstock of Scarinci Hollenbeck. And that's it for this edition of the Bloomberg Law Podcast. Remember, you can always get the latest legal news by subscribing and listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and at Bloomberg.com/podcast/law. I'm June Grasso, and this is Bloomberg.